Hello, everybody. Good morning and good evening to the Northern Hemisphere. We'll just wait another couple of minutes before we get started. But I want to say hello to everybody, and we'll just give the late stragglers a few more minutes to join. It's nice to see such a high attendance so far. We've got 46 participants already. Okay, well, let's just get started, given the fact it's a couple of minutes, it's 1 minute past 8 p.m. here in the eastern side of the United States. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for attending the second webinar of the 3-webinar series on production management hosted by Elite Energy and EnergySys. My name is Stephen Finney. For those that are joined the session, that didn't join the session last week, and I'm the Managing Director at Elite Energy Consultants. We are a platinum partner of EnergySys, and we're very pleased to be hosting this webinar series for this fantastic community of interested participants in production management. Today's session is around the journey to excellence in production, and is hosted by our client and good friend Juliet Oliver. But before we get started on the actual webinar, I just wanted to put a little bit of context around the technology that Juliet will be speaking about today. And the reason being that is some of you may not know about some of these technology choices that Todd Energy have embarked on. So it's important that we put a little bit of context behind that before we go into depth into the solving the business problem. So a little bit about EnergySys. EnergySys is a low-code platform that was designed by some fantastic industry experts that really wanted to revolutionize the software industry, specifically that supported the oil and gas market. And what that is, it's a cloud-based platform that hosts a number of applications that support hydrocarbon management, from hydrocarbon application, production forecasting, production loss management, opportunity management, off-take and coordination, pipeline, stock management. And Elite decided to build our functional modules called EPMF on the EnergySys platform. And we work in partnership with EnergySys around the deployment and using of these as accelerators for our clients in Australia, New Zealand, and other areas of the world. So moving into introducing Juliet, Elite Energy have been working with Todd Energy for quite some time now, for just around about 3 years. And Juliet is the Production Optimisation Manager at Todd Energy. We've been working very closely with Juliet over the number of years to build and support the enablement of her production management framework in the assets for Todd Energy. So I'm going to hand over to Juliet to talk a little bit more about her assets and move into the webinar. So thank you, Juliet.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, and thank you all for joining us today. Stephen, I will note that the rendering on my end is a little bit poor of the slides, but mostly just visuals and things, and hopefully you can follow along with the content that I have to say today. And I really hope that the content actually gives you a bit of a flavour for how important a production data management framework is on your journey of optimisation. So firstly, a little bit about Todd. So we're 100% owned and operated, and we're the leading onshore natural gas producer in New Zealand, really focusing on meeting New Zealand's energy needs. We're responsible for half of the country's energy production, and we're currently 500 strong across our upstream and our downstream assets, Nova Energy and Todd Generation. We're really focused on using our natural gas to provide affordable and reliable energy to New Zealanders, especially as we transition towards a low emissions future. So we've been around for about 90 years now, but currently our business is centred around 2 onshore natural gas fields, Maki Mangahewa in North Taranaki and Kapuni in South Taranaki, which will be the focus for today. So I should say that on the scale of operations around the world, we are really quite small, but that's important to note because what our journey will show you is that it is economical and incredibly worthwhile to invest in a production data management framework, even when you're only talking about 50 producing wells. Okay, next slide, please. So what I really want to talk you through today is why transition to a production data management framework, optimization or not. Why is it important and how can it help you? Next, going beyond allocation with your production data management framework system and what that can really add to your business. And then lastly, the necessity of a production data management framework and really the show of how it's been important for Todd when taking a holistic approach to production optimization. Right, so on to the next slide and what started this journey for Todd. So with the global downturn in oil and gas prices in 2016, Todd responded in pretty much the normal way by delaying the drilling of new wells. But we additionally decided to invest in an innovative approach to optimization to really squeeze more out of the value of the existing assets. So in doing so, we aim to counter a 30% decline in our asset value without drilling. And to do this, we focused on three things: the bringing together of people in terms of an integrated operations centre. Now, some of you may have these operating in your businesses, may have heard about them or seen them before. Really, it's the integration of people, process, and data supported by effective technology that enables us to make the right decisions at the right time. And then we needed a process. We needed a vehicle to drive this new way of working. So we birthed the production surveillance and optimization team and a life cycle, which I'll show you shortly. And finally, we needed to put fuel in the vehicle. We needed data. And we needed data that was easily consumable by these people and the process that we had developed. So with Elite's help, we designed a production data management framework and system, EnergySys, for Todd. Having these three components in place has really ensured that we can safely, efficiently, and cost-effectively deliver production, while also driving a massive increase in our value. Now, some of you would have heard Bernie speak last week, and something he said once, which really embodies, I think, how we've achieved excellence in optimization here at Todd, is that even though we're optimizing, we're too late, reactive. Closing the gap between when you need to implement and when you get there is where most of the value can be gained, switching to a predictive mode. And I really think that the PMF has enabled Todd to do this, reducing the time between when the organisation thinks of the opportunity and the moment it's implemented. And it's really been a superior process for us here at Todd. Right, so what you see here is our production optimization lifecycle. And underpinning that is a production data management framework, PMF, and the system EnergySys. Why EnergySys? Well, as Steve has mentioned, it's a cost-effective system that really allowed our lifecycle to come to life. So if you follow me around the lifecycle, the PMF first houses our well potentials. And with those QC'd, we can actually define our field potential. It then integrates our activity plans, enabling us to build forecasts and nominations. And once the IOC has done an excellent job of assuring production meets the forecast through surveillance and integrated operations, it then captures the production's day's data, performing allocation and reporting. Lastly, it tracks any deviation of actual versus forecast and manages that production deferment or gain. And it's with that data that we're then able to assess and unlock further production potential for Todd. So a PMF system like this really does support the tracking and monetization of molecules from well to export. And I know that sounds like a bit of a sales pitch, but I think Todd's journey is really proof of that. Cool, so next slide. Why systemize? Why not do this with, say, a bunch of spreadsheets? Well, what we needed was a single source of truth that provides data as a service. And a well thought out production data management system will do that. It will enhance your data collection and storage and validation capability. It'll improve your allocation process efficiency. Think closing month end in 3 days. It'll assure your data is traced and auditable, giving you greater confidence for regulatory reporting. And it's going to help you identify production enhancement opportunities by managing your loss data. It'll improve accuracy and efficiency of your forecast and nominations, which I'll talk a bit about later. And lastly, and probably most importantly, it will ensure that the data can be easily consumed by the organisation right when it needs it. Cool. So you're all thinking, next slide, please. You're thinking, that all sounds great. Where do I start? And my answer would always be allocation. Why allocation first? Well, you can't know what you're doing until you confidently know what you've done. And you certainly can't optimize until you understand yesterday and you can track today. So in a lot of organizations, this is often an unkept area, and the data captured and calculated as a result of allocation is actually at the heart of every other process. So not getting your house in order here will mean it quickly becomes your Achilles heel. So Todd transitioned from unsustainable spreadsheets for a single asset to an energy system Power BI solution that now incorporates 3 assets for end-to-end hydrocarbon allocation and emissions reporting. And using EnergySys, we were able to do things like automate data from multiple inputs, multiple different sources, provide a cloud-based platform for ease of data entry and QC in the field, which was also incredibly helpful during COVID-19, build a bespoke system that reflects our asset. So we have complete transparency of the allocation processes, and we've been able to tailor it to our available meters and their accuracy. We have a daily process that tracks RFs, which optimizes our month end and our production surveillance, which I will touch on later. And most importantly, we have the ability to change, design, and build in the system in-house, which was a real win for us. Cool, so going to our next slide and going beyond allocation. In integrating our PMF with the other components of the life cycle, we were able to systematically define the value of our locked-in potential. What is locked-in potential? Well, it's simply production that is locked. So it's attainable, but for some reason it cannot be produced. And it is the defining and unlocking of that production which has added value for us without drilling. It's made up of 4 key components: planned deferment, non-optimized or unsheltered planned activities that impact production; unplanned losses, reoccurring or preventable unplanned events that impact production; system constraints, these are things that cause a production bottleneck, and most of you will be used to identifying these through the use of your choke models; and maximum production potential. Capital projects that are required to increase production system capacity, such as going down to 10 bar at a well site with a well site compressor, or accessing undeveloped reserves. This is your behind pipe opportunities or going after untapped zones in existing wells. So now that you have a small understanding of what locked-in potential is, I'm going to briefly touch on how the PMF has helped to define these key components and unlock further value for Todd. Cool, so starting at the beginning of the optimization lifecycle, the PMF has actually improved the accuracy of our well potentials. So because you are constantly calculating what you did yesterday, you are able to better inform what you should be doing today and tomorrow. And we use the RFs from our daily allocation process to track performance, not only of our meters, but also our well models and our digital oil field. This means improved measure of what production is locked, and early identification of why. So on the next stop around the life cycle, the PMF has also enabled plan optimization. So by allowing us to visualize our production impact across the portfolio, this means we are constantly looking for and implementing sheltering and smoothing opportunities across all planning horizons. In doing this, we reduce the amount of locked-in potential from planned activities and also enable downstream revenue drivers to be accounted for, such as changes in energy demand. Moving round. So when we use the PMF to monitor, the system between sand face and export, helping us to keep on track to meet the production target. So any changes, anomalies, or exceptions between yesterday and today's RF will help reveal meter, plant, or well changes early on. This means you're not relying as heavily on the later time horizon surveillance processes to pick up issues, as pictured here. And this ensures that you're reducing the time between when a deviation from production is identified and fixed. So in smaller organizations where you don't have elaborate exception-based surveillance dashboards, this can be a really simple win. And lastly, we use the PMF on the next slide. Lastly, we use the PMF to manage the production loss. So by calculating and recording production performance against production potential or your forecast, this means we're able to, at any point in time, understand our bad actors, trips, or constraints, which then defines your locked-in potential associated with unplanned losses. This goes on to improve your maintenance and reliability strategies, your operating procedures, and how you spend your capital mitigating these issues. It will also track the accuracy of your plan deferment. And the learnings of that are then fed back into your planning process to improve forecast accuracy. So all of this, on our next slide, has really enabled our IOC and optimization lifecycle to efficiently unlock the production potential of our existing operating assets without drilling new wells. And this has meant a significant decrease year on year in the amount of locked-in potential across both assets. So as you can kind of see here, depending on where you are in the world and the rendering, what's important is that the colourful boxes, the green, the orange, and the blue for both assets have reduced between 2018 and 2019. So that means the size or the amount of locked-in potential actually locked has reduced for us year on year. Right, next slide. And so almost four years on, the results really have surpassed our highest expectations by increasing production by over 40%, when our aim was only to arrest a decline of 30%, or at least try to, which is still a huge amount of production. And, you know, this radically improved oversight has also benefited the safety of our people, community, and the environment. And where production would have fallen short, and we assured 20% of New Zealand's electricity supply, it means we've been able to deliver. So I can honestly say that working in this way with the support of a PMF reduces risk to the business, improves safety, and maximises production, and delivers timely opportunities that add value and reduce waste. So that's our journey with PMF. And if you're thinking about embarking on your own journey, I have a couple of hints or tips. So firstly, think about how you will consume the data to add value. We build a life cycle, but think about what optimization workflow best suits your business and design this upfront. Choose your end systems wisely. We ended up with systems like Power BI for reporting, and that's great because it had business continuity and support. Assure you can link all your data sources you have early on to EnergySys. Make sure you know where all your data sets are going to come from and how they're going to feed into a platform like EnergySys, and define this upfront. And sprint. So start small and start with allocation. It is an elephant, and don't try to eat the whole thing at once. It's taken us the better part of 3 years to get to this point for 2 quite small assets, 3 quite small assets. So sort of temper your expectations. And lastly, don't go it alone. I really would recommend using Elite on your journey. And that's all I have for today. Thank you. Happy to take questions or hand back over to Steve.
Thank you, Juliet, and thanks for the recommendation for Elite, and obviously a recommendation of the work that has come from various engagements of our leadership team at Elite, whether they've been working with other super majors, but it's really a culmination of a meeting of minds of how to manage the production in a more robust and repeatable way. What I'd like to do is open the floor to questions. We deliberately kept the kind of presentation down to a fairly short presentation to allow us to have more time to allow the participants to ask questions. So I'm going to start to look at the we've got one from Lara Bennett. Juliet, can you describe the transition to a remote cloud-based operations?
Describe it in, I'm guessing, in terms of whether it was painful or not. It really wasn't at all. It's no different than deploying any other system, I guess, within your organization, except that you do it in a web browser. And for us, because the interface is user-friendly and is a lot more structured and makes a lot more sense than a series of Excel spreadsheets, it was a real win, especially out in the field. So I would say, as long as you like the platform you're choosing, moving to cloud really isn't an issue. And, if you're talking more about the ITIM perspective, you do have to have the backing of your organization, and you have to have those people in place that are going to work with the energy systems to make sure that that cloud-based solution fits within your IT governance for your business. Sure. I would say as well, I'm happy to jump back to any of the slides. Sorry, I did go a little faster than practiced. And the rendering wasn't great. So if there were any particular slides or images that people didn't get, we can always jump back and I can explain further.
We have another question from Slavko Toskit, who's asking, how do you identify well or facility potentials, and how do you handle interdependencies?
Sorry,
one more time. How do you identify well facility potentials, and how do you handle the interdependencies?
Well facilities potentials. Okay, so in terms of defining our well potentials, we use a combination of things. So we have regular well testing campaigns. We have the PETX suite. So we have our Prosper models and digital oil field, which is running an IBM to look at daily allocation as well as our RFs from this allocation process. And our production engineer brings all those pieces of data together daily and monthly and makes an assessment of whether we think our forecasted well potentials are tracking away from what we thought and their declines. And then in terms of understanding what I think may have been the other point of that question is, how does that then link through to sort of like your choke model or your bottlenecks throughout your system, and how do you start to define where those bottlenecks are, is a much bigger piece and something I could probably would be happy to take an offline conversation on how we go about that, or an email response. So if that was the
we are actually collating a library of questions and answers as well, Juliet, so we can always take that part offline. So Damien Hawking is asking, how much is simulation and production modeling part of your production optimization processes?
Yeah, interesting one. And not a lot. We keep it pretty lean in that space because, a little bit of crap data in, crap data out. And we find that processes like this, which keep it really simple and clean, are actually build the foundation of how we digest our data. We do have things like the gap model and a digital oil field in that space, but in terms of plant modeling or anything like that, no, it's not required for what we're able to get out of. In particular, what we've built here is a nodal allocation process, and that's why I mentioned earlier that we've been able to tailor it to our asset. So we've got, internal meters and nodal points and gathering points where we can actually use the bench strength of the fact that our system does that to look at a smaller subset of wells and really allocate the correct production back to those smaller subset of wells, reducing your error percentage, and then therefore helping you to define what those wells are doing, and therefore not relying as heavily on models.
Thanks, Juliet. Kim Doer's now asking the question about what was the most challenging parts of your journey in the last 3 years?
My journey as a whole is definitely creating a change culture to go on a journey of optimization within your business. And the biggest challenge with the PMF was probably that we were at the frontier. So we were, with Elite designing this out of the box, like out of thin air. So we were making it what we wanted to be. So we did go through a little bit of trial and error, and we didn't always get it right. So I think that it hasn't been that the actual system hasn't lived up to its name, or the idea or the process hasn't delivered. It's that we've had to reiterate a few times, which is completely normal, but really great for the rest of the industry, because now, Elite and us and some other companies that have gone and done it are setting the benchmark, and we've ironed out all those wrinkles.
I think one of the challenges as well, just to support Juliet, was that field data capture component of that, what happened at the end of shift, and how to move your control room into an environment where there's wells and facility validation processes that you must perform to get the data both collected, validated before your allocation engineer picks it up in the following day. And that culture of having to go through that process at the end of every shift and using a tool as opposed to a simple diary on a desk or an Excel sheet was quite challenging, because you're getting people to use systems and indeed using processes. And I would say that was one of the recycles that we did in the first. About we envisaged a process for the control room, but we had to then not only harmonize that for the other assets, but we had to optimize on that process. And that did take a number of recycles with the control rooms. Colin Frost, how easy or difficult was it to get operations staff on board with the program? That actually goes to my point I was saying there. Was there any skepticism about the data-driven approach, and how did you overcome it, as if there was?
Yeah, so we were fortunate enough that we were already relying on the field to supply us some data through old broken spreadsheets. So in one way, they were really happy we were getting rid of these old broken spreadsheets that were just annoying. But on the other aspect, we were asking for more data, and their understanding of why do you need this? So I think it really comes down to the culture of your operations business, and we've had two great assets that had great culture, and in spending just time one-on-one and going out there cross shifts, handovers, working with them, stepping them through the system, showing them it's not actually that hard if they know where to click, making them really simple, like flip charts where they can just go step by step, was all they needed to sort of eventually get on board. And because we have the power of the IOC, we were talking to operations 24/7, we're there to coach and nurture as well, and to help them, encourage them when they've forgotten or when they're getting a little bit lazy. And I would say probably the hardest piece of data to capture so far to date has been the lost data. Now, the IOC can go and do that retrospectively for them, but we're really trying to encourage, that at the frontline operations, because they're the people that know exactly what happened when we took that, say, that trip or that outage. And it's just a journey. Like you can't expect to roll something out tomorrow and have them all love it and be on it and be using it the next day. You just got to keep working with the shifts, keep getting out there, and take their feedback. And we did. And some of the small nuances around how Energy Sys you work with Energy Sys, we tried to iron out, and we're still trying to iron out just to make it even more user friendly for them.
Yeah, nice. Alberto, can you speak a little bit more about the choke model for losses and efficiencies? Is it a standard model or is it customized?
So I guess one thing probably to note is that the choke model is not a part of the PMF that we've discussed today. And a choke model can be designed in various different ways depending on how your organization wants to go about it. And that's quite a bigger conversation or a bigger piece, but happy to, again, take an offline conversation or an email chat and describe how we went about building a choke model.
Adam is asking, what role in production logging play, if any, did wireline data acquisition operations increase or decrease?
Good question. So I guess in terms of wireline logging, and that sort of data acquisition, that probably continues on a little bit. No, okay, I'm going to reset there. It's more predictive driven. So what we do is we take our unplanned losses and we take the tracking of what the system does in terms of how we've performed versus our forecast, and as well as individual well surveillance using Pi and things like that. And with the IOC, we actually upfront are starting to identify, before wells have even gone south, that they need a little bit of help. And then that will initiate us moving the test separator there. It might initiate us doing a camera log to look for scale or a caliper or a PLT. And so I think, what happens is you still carry on in a lot of cases with your baseline surveillance program. And then you end up with this other layer of surveillance that really helps to front foot your issues and attack them before you've lost the well altogether. So yeah, that really is our whole life cycle working, and that's what we do day in, day out in terms of the wells, and some of the data that we drive out of the PMF enables that.
John is asking a question. John Dean, what would you look at first? Well decline percentage, then what would the next step be?
What would you look at first?
We need to expand on that question a little bit more, John, if you could.
Yeah. What would you look at first in terms of when building a PMF, or what would you look at first in terms of unlocking potential from more of a holistic optimization?
So if you could clarify that more, John, in the chat, we can provide an answer before the end of the session. Adrian is now asking about Juliet. How difficult was it to take upper management and the asset owners on a journey to a new PA system? Did you have any roadblocks?
No, we did not. And I think we come from a position of fortune in that, because, where we were coming from was really broken. So, and wasn't providing the governance and assurance that the business needed. So there was a blatant business need there already when I picked this up. And then because we understand the cost of a system like energy components, which is what we had to transition from when we merged our Kapuni asset over from Shell, selling an energy solution is really easy on an economical piece, because it's far more economic than a system like energy components. So I guess we started from a place of that was relatively unobstructed, and a business that was eager to see this optimization lifecycle fly, and was prepared to go with me with whatever I needed to make that happen. So quite fortunate, really. But I mean, if you want to use me as a soundboard to brainstorm some hurdles that you are experiencing and how you might get over them, I'm happy to, again, take email or conversation.
Slavsko is asking, what are the biggest opportunities you identified when you started production optimization journey? Example, drawdown, increase, lower system pressure, compressor utilization, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, that really is going into the discussion of our holistic optimization process, but you're bang on. The lowest hanging fruit were the really simple bottlenecks in your gathering and plant systems, really. And, Bernie, that's most of what Bernie sort of preaches, is that's where you take a walk around your plant and you go, what's that valve doing, and why is it even there, and why isn't it 100% open, and what's the pressure drop across it? And that's where, in your first, I would call toddler years of optimization, you're going to find not just low-hanging fruit, but fruit literally lying on the ground waiting for you to pick it up. And then in your wells, it's the same. Most of the initial upfront gains are from that initial drawdown that you get from debottlenecking at surface, but we had a very interesting completion strategy in our field and had a lot of untapped behind pipe reservoirs. So we were just on the cheap going in and reperforating or perforating new zones, and then that grew into bigger campaigns of complex fracking campaigns where we were going after zones in between already fracked zones, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where your lowest hanging fruit is and where most people would start. Gets harder as you get up the creaming curve, and that's when you really need a system like this, because that's when you're driving down your planned deferment and your unplanned losses a lot more. And you're really trying to nail home, your day-to-day operations rather than going after those big blocks.
Excellent. Thanks, Juliet. We have no more questions unless there's a call for any more. Ricardo has a comment saying, great and complete summary of what Todd is doing for gas optimization with the don't waste a drop mentality. I think that kind of plays to the title of the session about optimize before workover, before drill. I don't think I see anything else. So with that, just a quick debrief on next steps. So we do have some great questions here today. Thank you to everybody who has provided the questions, and also to everybody who's participated. The numbers are going up every single week, and it's great to see. And it's great to see that we can create a community of practice that have an interest in the topic areas that we are discussing. We are in the process of creating a separate site which will have both the question and answers and the ability to replay these webinars after them. So there will be a site for you to go to once you register. Oh, actually, there's one other question lastly. Just going, can you speak more about how this system has helped in regards to COVID-19? Clara Bennett.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's as simple as saying, you don't have to be on your VPN or whatever other IT, firewall issues, firewall sort of situations your company has in place. So that slows things down for us here. And especially in rural Taranaki, where some of my staff live out with their sheep on the farm, and, the speed of internet is not great. So being cloud-based means you can just go straight in and perform what you need to do each day. The allocation processes will get the data that you need. So yeah, it's really
the ability to one day work in the office and the next day be off-site.
Yeah, and definitely it's an interesting one. So some, in particular, our production data team are actually the people that probably work after hours the most. And it's really nice for it to be easier for them to work from home.
John has, I think, clarified a little bit more on the chat. He's not understanding. First, how do you find an underperforming well? Then what do you do? Look at next, such as well problems, water loading due to low flow rates, or would you look at surface plumbing choke problems, for example? I think it's more about your intervention of when you start to see underperformance of the wells. We're trying to explain.
Yeah, so in the same way I described how we go about setting our well potentials is exactly the same. Inherently you're actually finding whether a well isn't performing. So you're using your live real-time PI data. So any pressure or temperature data you have, any metering data you have for that well. You're using your well models, so your Prosper models, GAP, and if you're lucky enough to have something like a digital oil field, and then you're using your allocation process, which is going to tell you if your RFs are off for that particular well. And then, we're lucky enough that we have things like downhole gauges, so it becomes very easy to ascertain whether it's a surface or a downhole issue. And then the discussion on how you would go about looking deeper if you don't have those luxuries is really an offline conversation, because it depends on your specific situation. And I'd be happy to have that discussion and be a soundboard for anything like that, because we have, a series of vintages of wells and well sites and setups, and a very organic asset that's grown with time. So we've pretty much just about got it all here. If anyone needs me to be a sounding board, or the team. who probably know more than me, to be honest.
Question Brenda has just asked, would this model support non-operated data? I'm assuming non-operated gas. What would you think about adapting to support for non-operated production?
Yep, so we already do that. So you may have noticed that I switched between 3 and 2 assets there. We are JV to the Pohokura field, offshore and offshore field with OMV here in Taranaki, and we bring in our joint venture data, and that just comes in automatically into EnergySys, and that's how we consume it. Yep. So yeah, absolutely, bring in your non-operated data.
Excellent. So just to complete it, unless there's any further questions, everybody, just a point of order for next week. So we have Steve Miller, one of our directors here at Elite Energy, and ex-BG Group, ex-ConocoPhillips Operations Excellence, who's going to speak to us around the creation of a digital roadmap and the points around why digital is not only for super majors. So it's really about focusing on utilization of technology that can help you create this digital agenda within production operations. So we look forward to having the same attendees and the same amount of interest and participation. It's been fantastic. And if there are any other questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to me directly. You have my email on the poll. There is a poll there I would like you to answer about future webinars. We're offering up other webinars specifically around loss management, defect elimination, integrated activity planning and production forecasting, or if you have any other requests, please feel free to reach out to me directly. But in the meantime, what leaves me to say is to thank you to Juliet for her participation and her support, and equally thank you all for attending today, and we look forward to speaking next week. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming, and yeah, great that I could share the journey.